G'day legends and welcome back to the Fanatics Clubhouse. This is Chin Music and my name is Tom Gallop. It is raining runs. 900s in the first 6 Champions Trophy games and a Mitch Owen special to cap off the regular season games in the Australian One Day Cup. It is also the 13th episode of Chin Music. I'm a superstitious person. Moe, you're not as superstitious as me. I asked Hugo if we could skip number 13 and go straight to 14, which he declined.
Like a hotel.
Exactly. But here we are for our 13th episode. Welcome back to the Big Brown Couch. Great to have you as always.
Pleasure to be here as always, mate. Getting really comfortable sitting next to you, Tommy. And look at us, we've got white shirts and we've both got some denim on as well. This is as close as we've ever been dressed, I feel.
I feel like you've tactically gone for a linen shirt as well, so I can't sledge you for not having it properly ironed as well.
Yeah, you just can't tell if this is ironed or not. After last week, I went home and had a good hard look at my closet.
But gee, that mo's coming along well on your face. You're looking schmick, and it kind of offsets your brown boots quite well as well. I think it's working well for you.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate your feedback.
My mum was very quick to pull me up last week. I said that you were lowering the decorum of the show, and she said that decorum more relates to behaviour rather than appearance. So for all the English aficionados out there, I apologise for that, and I won't make that mistake again.
So you think my behaviour is up to par on the show?
I'm happy with your behaviour. A good little balance of intelligence and chipping me when appropriate as well. So that's very good. We have a lot of cricket to discuss today. As I mentioned before, the Champions Trophy is in full flight. 6 games in at the moment and some very interesting results already. And it was a big week in state cricket as well since we last spoke, Moe. The one-day final is just around the corner. South Australia playing Victoria in that one. Victoria just pipped you guys in a high-scoring game last week, and then there's 2 rounds to go in the Shield with things looking pretty tight with every team a mathematical chance to make the Shield final. So an exciting time in cricket.
Very exciting. A few disappointed New South Wales players after our last 2 one-day games, in a really strong position with 2 games to go, and unfortunately weren't able to put off the final touches. We lost both our last games to, in the end, not qualify for the final after, sitting in a really strong position. Really disappointing for us, and I guess for the guys who are also in the Sixers camp in that team. A couple of sort of good seasons in terms of good early and mid seasons, and then sort of not being able to finish off. And I guess even for the Thunder guys who ended up, getting themselves into the final, there's a lot of, we got close, but we just weren't quite good enough. So, I mean, there's some strong positives, but as well, you want to be playing finals and finding ways to make sure you're playing finals. I mean, it's great that we're able to put ourselves in positions, to get into the finals, but, you want to be playing in those finals and then winning them as well. But, you live and you learn, and as long as we're learning, then that's the main thing.
I imagine for yourself, still fit, still playing very well, but obviously closer to the end of your career than the start of your career. Given that New South Wales did have such a good start to the season, and on paper you're a really good team, it must be disappointing to lose those last 2 and fall out the back door.
Yeah, it is very disappointing, and I mean our depth was definitely challenged at the back end there. With Sean and Ben being selected, Sean Abbott and Ben Dwarshuis being selected for the Champions Trophy, when, originally neither of them were selected. We thought we were going to have, obviously with Jack Edwards and Hayden Kerr around, we thought we were going to have a really experienced one-day bowling attack. Obviously what Sean and Ben add in the field across 50 overs with their fielding skills, and then, they both bat as well. So they're just really hard guys to replace. You obviously, we don't even bother mentioning your Starks, Cummins and Hazelwoods, because you sort of, as a New South Wales team, you just sort of get used to not having those, your Lyons, your Steve Smiths, you sort of get used to just playing without them. But, when then you sort of, without those guys, you bring up your Shawns and your Bens, and then they go missing as well, and all of a sudden you're sort of missing 6 bowlers instead of 3. it starts to test your depth, especially when a lot of guys have already moved interstate for opportunities. And we're seeing guys like Nathan McAndrew, who was contracted a few years ago and had to leave. And you see what he's doing now in first class cricket, both in white ball and red ball, and doing really good things for South Australia.
Jason Sanger and Henry Hunt as well in the white ball and red ball game, both doing good things for South Australia as well. So plenty of depth in New South Wales cricket, but potentially just performing for the wrong times at this time of year. While we are talking state cricket quickly, would be remiss not to mention Mitch Owen, 149 runs off 69 balls, the third fastest list A century by an Aussie ever. He hit 14 fours and 10 sixes. I was looking at the score quickly, and I'd had a couple of beers on Saturday Arvo, and I said to my mates, oh, wow, Mitch Owen got a really fast 90. I didn't actually realise that he was 90 not out at that point. I think he was 90 off about 45 balls and then accelerated to go 149 off 69 balls. He seems to be the gift that keeps on giving, and I bet Australia half wish that he was over there in Pakistan for this Champions Trophy.
Yeah, I mean, as I sort of said, was it the last pod or the pod before that I felt, if they're going to take a punt on someone who's a bit of an X factor, I'd be going Mitch just because of the form he produced during the Big Bash. And, there's nothing like scoring hundreds, especially, or a bulk of runs for a player's confidence. And, to score 200s in one Big Bash season and then, again, like coming off the back of that, now scoring 100 in the domestic one-day comp. It's pretty special stuff. I saw he hit a 6, and I don't usually like to just bring out one shot when you're talking about someone's innings, but he did hit a 6 off one of their fast bowls. I don't want to mention any names, but into the second tier straight at Adelaide Oval. Usually when you get one in the seating area, even the first tier, or even if you hit the side screen there halfway up, like that's a big hit. To get it in the second tier of that stadium, it's humongous. So, he's obviously hitting the ball pretty well. He got a nice full swing on that one, that's for sure. And that game ended up getting pretty close, and I guess it says a lot about what they were, that bowling attack and how they were able to control the other batters. Because when a batter comes out and gets 150 off 60 balls in a one-day game, and then you're still a chance of winning, like the opposition team, then, I guess you can say, I guess for the other 240 balls, we actually bowled pretty well. But unfortunately, they just weren't able to control Big Mitch.
Big move at the moment, or certainly a trend in these big scores, 300-plus scores getting chased down. Victoria chased down your score of 310 pretty easily in the end. I think they did it in just over 40 overs. And we saw Australia chase that massive score against England the other day. As someone who's captained a lot and I guess tried to control the flow of games, do you think it is preferable to chase in white ball cricket these days? And is that the prevalent thinking amongst professional cricketers at the moment?
Yeah, I definitely feel there's been a huge drift or a change away from this runs on the board, which was, I guess when I first started playing professional cricket, and even when I was a kid listening to the commentators talk on international cricket, it was always about batting first and getting runs on the board and sort of building pressure and so on. But now I feel like the runs on the board at times almost just lets the opposition team know how hard they need to go. And because of the skill sets of all the batters now, some of the shots that Josh Inglis was playing and like the reverse sweeps over third man for 6 and making them look like they're not really that risky, which of course they are. But, that just wasn't around 20 years ago. That wasn't something a captain would have to consider. And, bowlers could just keep bowling at the top of the stumps and maintain some kind of control over the opposition batters. But at the moment, yeah, and I you just can't do that anymore. You need, the planning needs to be much more extensive. It's harder to keep batters quiet. They seem to have a lot more options. Of course, the ropes have come in, but I do think the the skill level of the batters and the ability to, I guess, score off a lot more balls. And there's probably, I'd say there's a lot more bowlers who bat now as well. So batting orders are deeper. So therefore the batters at the top of the order are going a little bit harder, knowing they've got a bit more coverage down the middle to late order. But yeah, I would definitely think it's a preference in most white ball games to bowl first and chase, especially on grounds that are smaller, just so you know, okay, we have to go this hard or we don't have to. You almost feel like you can chase down anything on the smaller grounds. And a lot of the time, if there's ever going to be anything in the wicket, it's going to be straight away. But I'd be interested to know, though, Tommy, from someone watching without having played professional cricket, and maybe it'd be good insight for any club cricketers playing, if you think that would be, do you think that would be applicable in grade cricket, like first grade down to fifth grade, or like at a lower level, or do you think that trend is just at the professional level?
Yeah, no, I was thinking about this, and it was why I was interested to ask you specifically, because I feel like at an amateur level, runs on the board definitely still is the thing, because blokes at that level, whether it be first grade all the way down to fifth grade, I naturally feel the pressure a little bit more than pro cricketers do, and they aren't, probably some of those guys are talented, but the reason they haven't had haven't been able to step up to the professional level is that they don't quite have it in the really crunch time moments. And I think the runs on the board mentality helps the fielding team in the second innings, and certainly puts the pinch on the batters who are chasing. And I think probably one of the key differences between grade cricket or amateur cricket and professional cricket is that back yourself, trust your skills mentality that you definitely pick up chatting to yourself and other pro cricketers. I think that's probably one of the things that those guys don't necessarily have that the pros do. We are going to go to a new segment on Chin Music. We love segments. Lurkers and lingerers will be back with us, but a brand new segment today, which is going to be Inside the Sheds with Moises. He was at training last week, and he's come straight from training again today. Different scenarios, I guess, for these two training sessions. I think last time we spoke, you were the day before a Shield game, so the team was very focused on the Shield game against Victoria. Today, it's a couple of weeks till the next Shield game. Disappointingly, you guys aren't in that one-day final on the 1st of March. But can you talk to us about what training was like today, and maybe how it was different from training that happens the day before a game?
Yeah, training was very low-key today. Obviously, a little bit of rain about in Sydney, so we weren't outdoors in the end. It was pretty much just turning over, keeping things active, keeping the boys active. Our next game's at the Wacker. So it probably didn't hurt that things were inside. It gave the boys an opportunity to, bat on some synthos. Not that batting at the Wackers like synthos, but you do get some steeper, faster bounce there. So it gave us an opportunity, to start working, whether it be short pitch bowling, obviously looking out in terms of probably going to be facing guys like Lance Morris. They got Joel Paris, obviously. So, we set up the bowling machine from left arm around the wicket for a lot of our right-handers, which Joel's been doing a lot of. So, and he has the skill to swing the ball both ways. But, and of the majority of the time, he does just go to that sort of wobble seam where he doesn't really want the ball to swing, but he wants it to nip off the wicket. So he's a complete handful in domestic cricket in terms of how to plan and set up for, because he is so accurate and consistent and has the skill to do so many things. And I guess when a bowler, typically left arm bowlers like to stay over the wicket for a long time, especially if they can swing it. And Joel obviously can swing it, but what he's been able to do is find this really irregular angle from wide left arm around and find a great deal of success bowling to right-handers from out there. And personally, for someone like me, and I'm sure a lot of right-handers, we don't really love the ball coming back in from a sharp angle, because historically we've faced right arm over from in close to the stumps, guys trying to swing the ball away. So when guys are bowling from wide of the crease, and obviously a left-arm bowler from around the wicket can bowl even wider, that starts to create some pretty ugly angles, or angles that right-hand batters wouldn't be used to. So the issues are there, obviously, with LBW is trying to get the ball to pitch in line. But with his skill of being able to nip the ball away and also swing the ball away, you always feel like you've got to, he's sort of inviting you to play. So there's some unique bowlers there in their lineup that the boys had a chance to, I guess, plan for today. And we'll continue to do that over the next 6 or 7 days. I think the boys are going back to club cricket on Saturday as well. So, again, another opportunity to have a hit out. I don't think there'd be too many wickets in Sydney grade cricket that can replicate the Wacker, but, there's nothing quite like confidence. And, if you're able to go out there and spend some time in the middle, it'll do the world of good for that. So it'll all be pretty specific now because we aren't in the one-day final. It'll just be about preparing for, the conditions that we're facing at the Wacker, and then when we finish there in Hobart.
In terms of the New South Wales team, you read a lot about Smithy, Marnus being the kind of batting psychos and wanting to hit as many balls as they can. 2 weeks out from a game, who are the guys in the New South Wales camp that, despite the fact they're not batting in a Blues game for a while, that are kind of hitting extra balls today before training, staying back after training to make sure they're getting those numbers up?
Curtis Patterson comes to mind. He's been, probably the form player in Australian domestic cricket at the moment. He was in there early today. Matthew Gilkes was in there early today, hitting some extra balls. Nick Manninson was in there. Almost everyone is in there doing extras at the moment, to be honest. Like we did finish that game, or was it Sunday? We did have all of yesterday off. Today was always going to be pretty light. It was only a half a day's training anyway. So if you're going to go in there to train, a lot of the guys try and make the most of it anyway. We got tomorrow off as well, so they'll be back in Thursday doing the same thing, hopefully outdoors though. But most of the guys are in there, but Curtis and Gilksy are hitting lots of balls. They're pretty hard to match in terms of volume of hitting balls. Curtis is very purposeful though with his training. He'll come in and this is what I'm going to work on. This is what I'm going to work on here, and then I want to do this, and he's very specific. So he doesn't just hit balls for the sake of it, but I feel like the evening before or the week before, he's almost got his next week planned out as to, what he wants to work on with the bat.
It's a little bit like me with my golf. I know whether I'm going to putt, to do a bit of chipping, or to work on hitting bombs down the middle. While we are inside the sheds, big new segment, the other thing I wanted to speak to you about, and we kind of touched on it earlier, was the mentality for the chasing team when the team batting first has put a big total on. And I think the other thing I'm interested about is if you've gone into the game expecting to bat second or hoping to bat second if you win the toss, how do you kind of remain confident in that decision when the team batting first has put a massive score on? England's score in the first innings was the biggest score. I think it was right up there in the biggest scores ever in Champions Trophy. I'll check that shortly. But Ben Duckett's score was certainly the biggest individual score ever in Champions Trophy history. So what would the chat have been there at halftime? And the second thing that I'm interested to pick your mind on is probably not as much as it does in Pakistan, but dew does play a part in chasing under lights in Australia, particularly down in Tassie. I know it happens. Talk to us about how you think about the dew, because sometimes it doesn't come, so you don't want to rely too much on it. I'd just be keen to hear about what does the chat look like amongst the batters when you go, well, this is going to be a big score, but we've got to remain confident. And how much is the chance of dew turning up contributing to those kind of thoughts and discussions?
Yeah, I'll answer the second one first. The dew it does play a huge part, and almost adds to the whole theory of wanting to bowl first. Especially in the Asian countries, in the subcontinental countries where dew will play a part, and a lot of the time spin plays a huge part. Not only how well you can bowl it, but how well you can play it from an opposition point of view. And as soon as there's dew on the ground, then, your wrist spinners really struggle to grip the ball. They struggle for consistency. Not only that, then the ball starts skidding off the wicket and there's not as much spin.
Do you feel like you're bowling with a hockey ball when the conditions are like that?
It's funny because I've actually been in teams where, the bowler starts, we're bowling at the death in an IPL game and the ball is just so slippery. And then we get off the ground and, the bowls were like, it was impossible to bowl with. And then the next training session, the bowling coach has got us bowling with he's dunked 6 balls in water with soap. And he's like, all right, we need to practice bowling with this. And then I just don't know how to, this isn't something that you do. It's not like we're practicing bowling with soapy cricket balls from a young age of 11. So then doing it 20 times, the day before a game's, it's going to be an awfully tough skill to pick up in 20 balls. You might get a little accustomed to it, but it is really hard to train for because it's just so rare that you bowl with a wet ball. You do some work on it, but you're also probably picking up some bad habits in terms of your actual bowling then once you have to bowl with a dry ball because you're probably not using the same dynamics and you're making a few changes to make sure that you're prioritizing control. So, and a lot of the bowlers are on workloads trying to keep their levels at a certain level. So it's a really tough thing to prioritize and how to prioritize or fit it into a bowler's lead up into games because, it's rarely practiced and it's very hard to do. So I'm not sure the answer as to how, and you don't really hear anyone say, Jasprit Bumrah, great bowler when the dew's in. There's not really, he bowls with a wet ball really well. You hear that when people talk about horses that run in the wet, they're good in the rain, but you don't hear it about any bowlers. So, obviously it's just a hard thing to do. And it's not just the ball that's slippery in the hand. If anything, I think the bigger part of it is that the ball starts behaving differently off the wicket. So the dew helps the ball skid on off the wicket rather than holding in the wicket and spinning, or even just creating that sort of bounce that is not as consistent. With a little bit of water on the ball and on the wicket, then it just skids on a lot more consistently. So that's the big part of the dew, and it does play a huge part in chases. And I think typically why so many people, win the toss. I guess it gets said, win the toss, win the game, on those smaller grounds when the dew comes in later at night. And then I guess part 2 to your question, or part 1 to your original question. Sorry.
That one, just to remind you, was to take us into the discussion between batsmen and I guess bowlers as well, because as you mentioned before, bowlers these days bat a lot better than they probably did 30 or 40 years ago, so often do play a critical role in these run chases. But how do you stay positive, stay confident in your skill when there's a score like 350 on the board in a one-day game? Because teams are doing these chases really easily, and it seems like they're not scared at all. So what is the discussion like inside the sheds before the openers go out in the second innings?
I can tell you exactly what the discussion's like from the bowlers. Usually if the team batting first has scored 350, the bowlers have come off and gone, enjoy that, boys. It's so flat. Get out there and whack them. You should be able to get those in 45. And then when you don't chase them down, they'll say, it's the batter's fault. But no, I think from a captaincy point of view, and the coaches say it a lot, but it's really hard to do well, is to actually not try and chase the runs in the first 10 overs. So a lot of the time, a big score gets put on the board. And even if you've just watched, say, just say England got 350, they got 110 of those runs in the last 10 overs. You've just watched that. You've just watched them back end their innings. They've gone at 6 and over for the first 40, and then with wickets in hand, they've scored plenty.
Well, I think Australia needed 200 when Inglis and Carey came together in the middle. So there was plenty to do. There was plenty to do at that point, but I guess the foundation had been somewhat set by Matt Short's run and ball 60 at the start. It wasn't like they went guns blazing from the very first over. No,
that's right. But I think, I guess the toughest thing to do when you're chasing something big is to remind yourself how long there is in the game. A lot of the time, someone, the openers or the top order we see this big score and we feel like we've got to go at that rate the whole innings, or we've got to get ahead of the rate early. And sometimes on wickets where, you might get an inkling that it's going to be easiest to score against the new ball, then, yeah, you probably do need to go a little bit harder in the first 10 overs. But I think a lot of the time, and now we're seeing teams become better and better at it, is actually going, okay, how did they go about it in setting it? Yep, they back-ended it, or they scored a lot here. Or if we manage this part of the innings better, but you sort of naturally try and navigate your way through that. But you like the one thing I always try and remind, when we're at the sixes and we're chasing a big score, say 200 plus, is we don't need to get them in the first 4 overs. Like, we don't want our best batters, say Flip and Vincey, going out there batting, not playing not playing shots that suit them, or not playing to their own strengths, because they're trying to chase, trying to get the team ahead of the rate too early. We've got all 20 overs. We've got to do this the right way, and we're not going to chase it in 5. We're not going to chase it in 10. We're going to chase it. Let's take it as deep as we need to.
Does that mindset prevail though when, say, it's Flip and Vincey out there, and the other team manages a maiden in the first 4 overs? Because certainly when you're watching, you see that the run rate spikes. One maiden in a chase of 200 plus. The required run rate genuinely spikes, and certainly the runs required look a lot more intimidating. So when you're in the dugout and there's a slow start to a big chase, are people whispering, shit, this is getting a little bit harder now? Or is it still, don't worry, we were never going to get them straight away, a lot of cricket left?
Yeah, as you say, a maiden in any T20 game is huge, and it's not something like, from a bowling perspective, if you can put 6 balls where the batters have not even got one scoring shot together, it's going to make chasing any total a lot harder, let alone a score over 200. And it's not to go out there and, block the Christ out of it either. You're going out there, you're trying to score off every ball. But, I'm saying, I guess, more from a point of view of, I want to see Flip and Vincey, hitting to areas of the ground that they want to hit the ball to, and just because we're chasing something a little bigger, that they're not trying to access parts of the ground that they don't like to normally, or they're not trying to take bowlers on who they don't like to. If anything, you'd say go harder at the guys you're more comfortable against, like maybe up your ante against those guys, and rather than upping your ante against guys that you're not as comfortable against. So that would be, I feel like there's always ways to, skin a cat, so to speak. And, maybe we're not defending at as many balls. We're trying to score off more balls, and then we do pick up the boundary here and there. But, it's become a lot easier because guys are doing it more often and they're learning from doing it. So, I think earlier it was rarer. Especially earlier in my career, and now we've just become accustomed to it, guys. Especially once you do chase that, or you've played a part in a team that have chased a score, or you've been not out at the end of a game that you've chased a score, that gave me a lot of confidence as a batter, and it gives batters a lot of confidence knowing that you've put the icing on the cake, or you're not out at the end of a game. You've just chased 190. You've got 40 not out, and, polish the innings off. Then next time you're in that situation, you go, I've done this before. I can do this. I don't need to panic. It's all good. And I think for me, what comes to my memory is watching Lockie Shaw do that for us in a game at Adelaide early in his career. And I'm like, it's very rare to see someone come in one of their first games and finish a game off like that. And, that was a huge thing for him in his development moving forward, because that's a really tough situation to navigate. Thankfully for him, he had Benny D up the other end, who's been in that situation a few times. But, he'll take a lot of great confidence out of that moving forward, because, he's polished. He can go, I was there when we won that game. Like, I was out in the middle, and, you can score 60 and then get out, but it's not quite the same. Even if you've only got 30 not out, if you're there at the end when you've won the game, you've literally guided your team home. Of course, you need the base. You need that good start to get you there, but there's a special sort of confidence you get out of being out there, scoring the winning runs, or being out there when you've scored the winning runs.
Great example of that, obviously, in the Champions Trophy a couple of days ago. And we're about to go deep into the Champions Trophy, but Virat Kohli didn't just get 100. He was 100 not out in arguably the biggest one-day of the year so far. India coming on top of Pakistan there in Dubai. Going inside the sheds with Moises, very interesting, and we're lucky to have you, Moe. So keen to bring that back in the future. I think one of the things I'm interested to pick up on in another episode is that thing you've spoken about a few times, and we've never really gone deep on it in terms of the discussion around targeting specific bowlers in the other team. And I know that that is a big thing that you guys talk about, so maybe we can chat about that in a future episode. But let's go Champions Trophy. 6 games in the book. 6 games in the books, and off the back of New Zealand beating Bangladesh last night, the host nation Pakistan are out. Massive shame, I think. First time Pakistan is hosting a tournament or a big ICC tournament in 29 years, and it sounds like the vibe there for that tournament has been massive. That the crowds for the games that don't involve Pakistan have been really big. So massive shame for Pakistan that their team is now out. Big news as well for the Australians. Josh Inglis scored a sparkling 100 against England. He's now the 4th Australian to score 100 in each format. Can you name the other 3?
Shane Watson.
No. Or...
Yep. Yes.
Yeah, he is. No, sorry.
David Warner.
Yes.
Glenn Maxwell.
Yes. And I think Finch. Oh, no, Finch doesn't have a Test 100.
Yeah.
One days.
You're welcome.
It's funny, the thing I took that from, because I'd read it, you're right, it's Watson, not Finch, but the thing that I took that from, because there's a screenshot on my iPad, says Finch, but whoever tried to trick me, luckily Moises here is very sharp. Couple of earlier games, New Zealand accounted for Pakistan, obviously the beginning of their demise. India have had 2 really comfortable wins, and I think let's start there, given we've talked about Australia and England a little bit. England comfortably beat Bangladesh in the first game. Shubman Gill got 100. He was, in fact, the favourite to lead the runs for the tournament at the start. And KL Rahul with a very solid 41 not out. I think the other thing of note, given that we missed him in Australia this summer, was that Mohammad Shami was 10 overs, 5 for 53. It shows whether in a red ball or a white ball game, having a strike bowler and someone with as much experience as he's got is massive. And for India, you feel like his inclusion in this tournament might just be that little X factor they need to ultimately win.
Yeah, they definitely needed, I guess, someone with that sort of level of experience and level of calmness in that bowling attack without Bumrah there. So he was a huge inclusion. And huge for the Indian team and the Indian fans, but he is, he is no Bumrah. He's a very good bowler, but I can't highlight enough how much of a standout Jasprit is. And going into these types of tournaments, he can bowl death, he can bowl the start, he can bowl through the middle. He has impact the whole way through. If I'm a captain of a team and I have Jasprit, every one of his overs are like hen's teeth, and yes, how you use them, and even from an opposition team, when they have to look at, if we can get Bumrah for 45 or 50, that's a huge night, that's a win, and minimises impact. So I know it is a great inclusion to have Shami, because without him and without Bumrah, it would have been a pretty tough task for their bowlers, but now that they do have Shami there, I definitely think it helps them. Helps, I guess, bring in, or I think they were favourites for the tournament, so I guess it solidifies that a little bit more. Because without that sort of experience, then they've definitely got the batters to do it. But you'd almost feel like if it got flat and if they were bowling, when there was a bit of dew and that took their spinners out of the game, which are always strong, then you'd sort of back yourself as a batting team. But as you've mentioned there, some of their key batters getting some runs on the board early, getting ahead of the tournament, going confident into the later rounds. I did want to touch on Virat's 100.
We'll go to Virat's 100 in a second.
Okay.
Just talking India, Bangladesh at the moment, because the last thing I wanted to mention was you spoke about how in a big run chase, You don't need to get all the runs in the first 5-10 overs. But in a smaller run chase, which can also be nerve-wracking in its own way, India only chasing 228 in this game and obviously looking to get their tournament rolling. Shubman Gill and Rohit Sharma put on 69 within the first 10 overs. I think Rohit fell kind of two balls into the 10th over of the game. Getting off to a flyer like that when you're chasing a small total, that's massive, isn't it? Because if you're the bowling team there, you need a bit of a miracle to bring it back.
It is huge. And if anything, I would say, and as bizarre as this sounds, you can actually go a little bit harder in a smaller total at the start of the innings, because it cracks down that it puts the bowlers under pressure early for a start. And then if you lose a couple of wickets, that the run rate's manageable for the batters to come in. So, it's not like, if you're only chasing 4.25 and over like India are there, if they're 2 for shit, it's not impossible for 4 and 5 just to go, okay, you know what, I'm going to play some pretty solid cricket here for a while. I'm not going to take too many risks. And typically it's a white ball, it's a one-day wicket, it's pretty flat. You should be able to sort of just invest a little bit of time out in the middle. But if you're 2 for shit chasing 350, number 4 or number 3 and 4 and 4 and 5, they're having to take risks that they don't really want to take way too early in the innings, and you're almost out of the game unless there's something really special, and they continue taking risks and not getting out. But it's if anything, I feel like you've got a little bit more permission to go harder in a smaller run chase, because the run rate, if you do leave your team in the shit a bit, then the run rate's very manageable. But, when it's a slightly bigger target, then you do need a better base to sort of catapult your team forward on. As much as it doesn't sound like, it doesn't sound right, but I know from a batter who's batted 4 in not only T20 cricket, but one-day cricket for a long time, I would prefer a much more solid, slower base, and then being able to come in a big run chase total, knowing, okay, I only have to get 150 of these in terms of partnerships. It might be 10 and over, but at least I'm going, I've got that freedom to chase it hard, where if we're 2 for 20 and I need to go at 8 and over or 7.5 and over for 40 overs, that's a really, that's a tough thing to negotiate. A lot tougher than going at 10 and over for 15 overs. So, I'd much rather be in early in a low-scoring game but are slightly ahead of the rate than being early in a high-scoring game already ahead of the rate. So, yeah, I would. That's the way I would look at it, and I would go bat with absolute freedom, knowing that it's a bit of a win-win.
We spoke a lot about how England had gone so hard in that one-day series before the Champions Trophy against India, and it had kind of done them in a little bit because no one had anchored the innings. But we've seen, even in the big totals this tournament, teams go back to that more traditional. Openers try and get off to a bit of a start, the middle order build a bit of an innings and try and leave wickets in hand. I do want to talk a little bit about particularly how New Zealand did it in their win against Pakistan, but I know you're chomping at the bit to wax lyrical about Virat Kohli. So let's talk India-Pakistan Sunday night. India won by 6 wickets. Pakistan were all out 241, and India chased it comfortably in the 43rd over. Virat Kohli, it baffles me whenever I read his one-day international statistics. That was his 299th game. He passed 14,000 runs in Sunday's game. He averages just under 60. He's been not out 45 times, and he's got 5,100s and 73 50s at just under a strike rate of 100. Like, those are truly baffling numbers.
It really is. I probably not. Haven't seen anything like that in one-day cricket yet. Well, I don't think we have. But again, in a chase, I guess I wanted to talk about the contrast between his innings and, say, a Josh Inglis. And I know the totals were different. And Josh Inglis's innings and the position they were in, as he said, with Carey, they still needed 200 runs. But there was that sort of level of, okay, I need to take a whole heap of risks here, well, not a whole heap, but I need to take risks. And he got 120 off 90 balls, which is just ridiculous. A super an amazing knock, a really sexy innings, and it's very rare that you see that. It's not something you see from someone all the time in one day cricket. And I guess with Virat's innings, I guess that's more of a typical sort of ODI 100 that you would you'd come to expect from your middle order batters. But I wanted to highlight Virat's ability to just score runs off deliveries. So I think he brought up his 100 off 110 balls. So those 110 balls, he had 48 singles and 12 twos. So I'm not including any boundaries. He's scored off 60 of his 110 balls just in singles and twos. And it doesn't seem sexy. That actually sounds really boring. And I think that there is the genius of Virat Kohli in one-day cricket, of making something that's quite difficult to do look very easy, and making it look like, oh yeah, I can just do this all the time. And to have the ability, and I'm not including boundaries, he scored off 60 of his 110 balls, not including any boundaries. So his scoring shot percentage starts going up. I think once you include the boundaries, he's scoring off almost more than 70% of the balls that he faces, which is out of control in one-day cricket. I know it's 100 off 110 and it doesn't look that sexy, but I only think he hit 10 boundaries anyway. So maybe it's just a little bit below 70% of scoring shot percentage. But that is just the perfect way to navigate a chase. And people can say, oh yeah, it was only 240, it was only this, it was only that. But he could have lifted the gears if he wanted to, but he didn't want to expose any other batters to, or didn't want to expose India to, a collapse or anything like that. And he just made that chase. It was an absolute clinic. To knock around 48 singles and 12 twos, it is just batting skill level of the highest of, it's just elite.
He's like the Toyota Camry of cricketers.
He is that, and just never breaks down.
Never breaks down. Highest selling car worldwide. Super reliable. If you need to pick a car for any situation, give me a Toyota Camry. I was sitting at the cafe in Clovelly the other day, and a matte green Lamborghini full drive drove past. I've never heard a car make as much noise. Behind the wheel was Nick Kyrgios, of course. And it made me think, I want to see one of those once in a while. It was pretty unpleasant to see it. Kind of cool because Nick was in it. But give me a Toyota Camry any day of the week. Super reliable, nice and quiet as they become more electric as well. Maybe the Kyrgios car is more the Josh Inglis of innings, which we can talk about shortly. But while we are on India-Pakistan, I think the other thing to call out was Hardik Pandya. He seems to be one of those bowlers who's able to kind of be that strike bowler and get early wickets, but he's just as capable to come back in the middle overs or later in the innings and really do a job and tie up an end. Is that a particular skill? Because I feel like for Australia, we've generally got Ben Dwarshuis does bowl the later overs, but he's particularly potent with that new ball, and then you've kind of got Nathan Ellis that is less of a strike bowler, but a master in the middle later overs. But it seems to me that Hardik Pandya can kind of do both just as well.
Yeah, I think with Hardik, what he understands really well as a bowler is exactly what batters are trying to do to him. And I've played against Hardik a lot. And obviously being an all-rounder myself, he's someone that I've, watched develop. He's obviously, much younger than I am. And I remember watching him from when he was quite young, and it looked like, I've never played in his team. I've been lucky enough to chat with him a lot after games and so on, and I a huge amount of respect for what he does. But he has a great understanding of where batters are trying to hit him. And you can, from a professional cricketer's point of view, I can sit there and watch him bowl to certain batters, and I feel like, as you mentioned there, when he comes back through the middle and at the end, he knows where the batters are trying to hit him, and he's trying to bowl the ball into areas where, to that specific batter, that it is quite hard to hit it. He's going to make it quite hard for him to hit him for boundaries or consistent boundaries. And he's just got that awareness of, okay, this is where he wants to hit me. I'm going to try and make that hard for him. And not all bowlers develop that, because a lot of the guys, whether it's swing or speed, they've come up through their age groups, and they might not be batters either, so they might not think like a batter. They've come up through their age groups, I guess, or their years playing cricket, relying on a particular asset as a bowler, whether that's swing or speed. Where Hardik, you can obviously bowl with a little bit of pace, but he doesn't really swing the ball a huge amount. He's not that fast, and he's just got a great awareness and great skill level, and can just figure out his way through overs. And I think because he's such an aggressive batter, and the way that he bats, he's constantly thinking, okay, where's the batter? What would I do if I was facing me here? Where would I try and because he hasn't ever needed to rely on speed or swing, he's always had to rely on his cunning, or his ability to outthink batters, which is in one-day cricket extremely important, and T20 cricket as well. Which makes him so useful. Obviously, what he can do with the bat is pretty hard to match. But, once you start throwing in his 10 overs, he becomes a very, very important person to have in your one-day team.
I want to talk quickly about a bit of a juxtaposition about the way that the Indians approach the game, and then seeing Pakistan bow out of the tournament after what has been a chaotic 6 months for Pakistani cricket, to say the least. I saw that Virat brought up his 100 and he looked at the dressing room, and I think he said it in Hindi, so I couldn't read it, but I read that the translation was, "I told you, relax." So to have someone with that calm head to be in that massive game and get them home, and then you juxtapose that to the Pakistanis. They've had 2 pretty convincing losses. This is coming off some really questionable selections over the last 6 months. They've chopped and changed coaches. I think they've had 2 white ball coach or 2 changes in white ball coach in the build up to the Champions Trophy. I'm sure that is all in the pursuit of a result here, which they haven't had. Where do you go if you're here for Pakistan? A notable double failure for Babar Azam so far, and I think people were probably expecting him to come out of a lean trot and perform here. And Mohammad Rizwan, he kind of got going against India, but didn't ultimately carry on and get them to a total. For Pakistani cricket now, they're going to potentially bow out 3 and done. Where do you go to from here? And I guess, how do you approach the situation they find themselves in without just kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater and going into chaos mode like they seem to do quite frequently?
It is a tough one because in your own conditions, conditions that very well, you can get beaten by good cricket at any time, but to host a tournament in your own conditions, I know if, just say Australia were to host a Champions Trophy in Australia, I'd be extremely surprised if they were knocked out in the round games. Having said that, it is only 3 rounds, and Pakistan have played 2 relatively strong teams, but you would expect, Pakistan are a very strong cricketing nation. I would expect them to have at least won one of those games against New Zealand and India at worst case. And I think you mentioned those 2 guys' names there with Babar Azam and Rizwan. I think them not firing isn't the issue for me. So the issue for me is that they have to fire for Pakistan to win. So I think until, they have 6 batters or 7 batters in a team that they can rely on to win them a game. Just, you look at India's team, not only do they have 6 or 7 batters in that team now that can win them a game, they've got another 5 waiting. Probably more than 5 waiting, where I guess with the Pakistan team, they've probably got 2 main or key batters in ODI cricket that they rely on to score the majority of their runs. And when they don't, they struggle to get the results that they're after. And you can't expect, 2 batters to carry a team through a tournament. You can some tournaments here and there, like they can, they might get, they are very good players. So, when Babar Azam was on that heater and felt like he was, almost matching Virat statistically, but it's very hard to do for as long as Virat's done. And Virat's had a lot of great support around him as well in that Indian team. And It's just unsustainable to think that as a cricketing nation, you can go through and really challenge in, World Cups or Champions trophies on the back of, say, two experienced batters. And I know they've got a lot of terrific batters, and they've got a lot of talent in that team, not only in the team, but waiting to get into the team. But maybe it's just that international experience or that batsmanship, and what you were talking about earlier, Tom, about, once things come to the crunch, are they making the right decisions? Do they panic a little bit? I'm not sure what happens there, or what that structure is, what the culture's like with it, behind closed doors in the sheds there. But, if I was, I guess around that Pakistan team, I'd be trying to pick, I guess, maybe 7 or 8 batters that they see, including Bubba and Rizwan, including those two guys. And I'd be picking and sticking for a few tours and making sure these guys get experience, the same amount of experience that these guys have, reached, and not chopping and changing their team as often as they do.
Well, I think Australia and South Africa are good examples of that. Australia starting the tournament really well against England, which we're going to get to shortly. But I saw South Africa had lost their last 6 one-dayers leading into this. And then they start the tournament with a really convincing win. So that would definitely that would support your theory of pick and stick, give these guys a chance, and they're going to find their feet eventually.
Yeah, they are. And you just have to be... The only thing with the pick and stick is you have to... I guess the guys you have to pick, they're not necessarily, the guys who are best right now, or who... they might be out of form a little bit. Say someone like Marnus in Test cricket over the last 6 months. I'm still picking him because I see him as someone that's going to move that team forward for the next 5 years. So that's the kind of example that I'm talking about. It might be, a 23-year-old who's shown glimpses in international cricket, has scored heaps of runs in domestic cricket, has showed that he's got the skill level in international cricket, but he's just struggling with some decision-making, some of his options out in the middle. That's the type of guy that I'd be picking and sticking with. Australia have done it a little bit even with Jake, picking him again for this tour despite not scoring, as many runs as he would have liked to in his last sort of few outings for Australia. And, I guess I was pretty critical of that before. And, I feel like he's got a pretty decent opportunity on the back of, I guess, maybe not the most consistent run scoring. But
I think Nathan Ellis is a pretty good example of this as well, because he's kind of been given a pretty consistent crack at white ball cricket over the last 3 or 4 years. I think certainly, I knew him, but I think 4 years ago when he first played for Australia, quite a few people would have been like, who is this bloke? But he was kind of consistently ramped up in terms of how much white ball cricket he played for Australia. They stuck with him after, potentially not some of his best performances early playing for Australia. But now we've got this tournament, no Hazelwood, no Cummins, no Stark. And Ellis is a pretty established part of this team. And through one game, he certainly looks like he's up for it, and he's not overawed by the occasion.
Yeah, Ellis has a really rare skill set that not many bowlers do. And he's one of those guys that when he walks onto that field, he expects to bowl all the really difficult overs. And as you mentioned before, he's not really someone who's going to bowl in the first 10 overs of the game unless shit hits the fan and you need someone to close out with 2 fielders out and say overs 8 and 10 or 9. But he's a guy that, he's going to bowl a lot of his overs at the death through the middle, and he's going to try and minimize damage and, I guess control the scoreboard when 2 batters get away. He's one of those bowlers that really bowls a lot of the stuff that, I guess your strike bowlers don't really want to bowl. It is a really rare skill set and something that's so valuable in T20 cricket, and we're starting to see it more in one-day cricket because the scores are getting higher and higher. So that skill of that sort of defensive bowling is becoming a lot more important than what it was, say, 10 or 15 years ago.
Speaking of defensive bowling, the Aussies head to Rawalpindi I've practiced that in the car so many times driving out, and I still stumbled it the first time.
In your green Lamborghini?
I wish. My Mazda 2. They head to Rawalpindi, home of which famous Pakistani cricketer? Arguably the most famous Pakistani cricketer in my eyes.
Imran Khan?
Wrong. The Rawalpindi Express, Shoaib Akhtar. If you haven't seen Shoaib Akhtar on Instagram recently, the bloke is living the high life. I don't know how he's doing it, but look it up. He spends a lot of time at the front of the plane and sharing it on Instagram, so do yourself a favour.
Tom, do you know what I remember about Shoaib Akhtar, other than bowling really fast? I remember the great Tony Greig as a young kid listening to international cricket. Whenever Pakistan came out to Australia to play in the Test series, Tony Greig would comment more on how handsome Shoaib Akhtar was than how fast he bowled. And I just remembering as a kid just thinking,
Akhtar. He used to say, Akhtar.
So strong, and look at him, he's so handsome. He would have no troubles with the ladies. And I just remembered thinking, what is this guy talking about? Like, I was 10, 11, 12 years of age and didn't even really know what it meant to be handsome. But like,
you know a thing or two about it now, don't you?
I was going to say that actually, but thanks for stealing my thunder.
Layup. It's called a layup.
Yeah, and I just remember thinking, why is this guy talking so much about what this guy looks like? And not talking about the fact that he's bowling 155 kilometres an hour.
Famously came and played for Mossman and actually opened the bowling with Brett Lee at the other end.
You know, I was at a game at Hurstville Oval as a young kid where he was playing for Mossman, and he bowled a bouncer to one of our guys in club cricket, and he ended up got out hit wicket because he hit ended up falling onto his stumps.
Yeah, having played grade cricket and a very small smattering of first grade games, I dare say I probably wouldn't be in this chair had I been required to face Shoaib Akhtar. But yes, Australia heads to Rawalpindi tonight to play South Africa. People are kind of pegging this as a battle to top the group. They are expecting a really flat wicket. That was how we got to Shoaib Akhtar. We were talking about defensive bowling. The record of one days in Rawalpindi suggests that there will be a lot of runs scored. Australia coming off the highest run chase ever in Champions Trophy history. But, you know, where do you see this one being won and lost? I think South Africa started the tournament really strongly. Australia have had, although they slipped up a little bit against Sri Lanka, they've had a pretty strong 12 months of cricket. Overall, I think our one-day record isn't great recently, but Australian cricket, it certainly seems to be in a strong place. This is a big game. Where do you see it being won and lost?
Aiden Markram for South Africa. I think for Australia, if they can control him in that middle order, somehow find a way to get him out early or to minimise damage, I think that will go a long way to controlling, I guess, that attack. I mean, there's all that batting order. There's always guys that can come out and play a worldie and play a really special innings, but I feel like he's their heartbeat in that batting order, especially without Klassen there at the moment. Without Klassen there, I feel like a lot falls on his shoulders. And there's a good reason for it. He's a very special white ball cricketer, I think, all three formats. But, he can come in and play the role that Virat played the other night, and he can come in and do, he can score 130 off 80 balls as well. So he's one of the few batters in world cricket that just has the skills to play almost all the situations that the game asks of him. And I guess for me, if I'm the Australian team, and I've got some team meetings and stuff, I'm spending a lot of time on how we're going to control this guy, because there's not many guys that have the options and that can manage situations like he can.
Aiden Markram is younger than I am. He was playing in the tournament from the shirt that is behind you with my name, and I think Australia, South Africa, the West Indies, and the English team were in the finals day played at the Oval. And there was a bit of a tight corridor, and he was walking down, and he definitely didn't need to say it because I'd already made the room for him, and he said kind of something like, "Move out of the way, little boy," or something like that to me. It was kind of one of the more alpha dog moves that I've ever been on the other end of, but I definitely feel better about it given how well he's gone in international cricket since that
Tom, and
pretty small
let
tournament.
me just say he's a lovely man. He would never have meant anything by it. He's very humble. He's a very humble and kind human being.
I'm 6'2", 90 kilos as well now, so he doesn't want to call me little boy again. While we wrap up, I do want to bring back Tommy's Lurkers and Lingerers Champions Trophy edition. We're going to do teams today quickly, Moe, before we do wrap this episode up. I mentioned that New Zealand have started the tournament in a pretty clinical way, as they tend to do in these big tournaments. But with an unsexy team, as I said before, and potentially a team full of names that aren't as household as some of the other nations have got, are New Zealand here as a lurker or lingerer? Are they lurking around? Are they lurking around and going out the back door, or are they lingering until the end of the party and potentially giving the title a shot?
I'm going to get off my diplomatic seat, and I'm going to say they're lurking.
I like it. And what about the Aussies?
What about you, Tom? What do you think?
I think New Zealand... Look, my gut tells me that they'll be lurking as well. I think some of the other teams just look like they've got a bit too much class. I really like India. I don't mean to just say that, but I think in these conditions, India just look too strong. I don't know who New Zealand would be billed to play in the semis, but actually they can't play India. I think they're in the same pool. But I think New Zealand, if they do come up against a team like India, either in the semis or in the final, I don't think they've got quite enough class. The other team I was going to put to you is Australia, actually, because their form had been questionable coming in, but certainly one game in against England, they look back to their usual selves in these big one-day tournaments. Are Australia here to stay, or are they going out the back door?
Oh, look, I'm similar to you there, Tom. I guess before the tournament, with them missing, I guess, their big three quicks, probably their first big tournament without Warner at the top of the order. Also, losing Finch a couple of years ago, I still probably think they're lurking. Obviously barracking for them, but I think if Australia make the final, the grand final, that touring party should be extremely proud of themselves, because there's a lot of depth players there. There's a lot of players there that wouldn't, I guess, normally be there, and they're trying to grab hold of a very new opportunity, and they're going to be coming up against some experienced players from around the world, and it's not that I think they can't do it, but it's for a lot of these guys, it'll be their first time at such a high stakes tournament. Especially once you start getting to some of the quarters, semis, and finals. I do think the environment that, say, like a McDonald and Vittori would keep would definitely make those players feel a lot more comfortable than, say, maybe some other environments in world cricket at the moment. But I still think the on-field experience, that it's really hard to explain, I guess, the responsibility you feel when you go out and represent your country, and I guess maybe sometimes the judgment you fear as well. So, it's something that takes time to get used to, and when you're first coming in, especially at a tournament so big like the Champions Trophy, there's a lot of players doing that for the first time, and I'm not expecting them to win the Champions Trophy, and if they get close, then I think they should all be very proud of themselves.
Love the use of the word barracking, sitting there in your suede RMs and your Ralph Lauren polo. It was very Melbourne AFL fan of you. I think you kind of fit that mould quite nicely. I can see you being in a lot of Swans games in your post-cricket career. That is all we've got time for in episode 13. As I always like to ask you, mate, how do you think we went?
I think it was good. I do want to round back. We've gone over time just a little bit. One thing that came to mind when we were talking about New Zealand was I do think they have one of the most underrated cricketers in world cricket in Mitchell Santner. And in those conditions, what he can do with the ball, what he can do to a batting order and restrict from his end, given the right conditions, they do have a grace. You don't want to ever rely on one bowler, but because I think he has such a special skill set, he's a great fielder and he can bat a bit as well, I think Australia would love to have someone like that in their team at the moment. I think he's a superb cricketer, world class. And if they had, I guess, maybe a Lockie Ferguson to go with that, or a Southey, or, a Trent Bolt, say, then you've got a bowling attack that can really, take this game deep, as well as Matt Henry, of course. But, I just feel like maybe they're lacking some of that international experience to go with, 2 or 3 of their key players that they have at the moment. Sort of like we mentioned about Pakistan before. I wouldn't be surprised if they challenge at the finals, because I just think their culture there and what they're able to do year in, year out with such a small population, and, I guess their resource levels are so much lower than a lot of other countries around the world, and what they're able to achieve is amazing. So it wouldn't surprise me if they get there anyway, but I just wouldn't tip that.
And of course, Rachin Ravindra, who is named after Sachin Tendulkar and Rahul Dravid.
Absolute freak of a player.
And the best name in world cricket.
It is a gun.
The best name in world cricket. That's all we've got time for. If you want more chin music action, you know where to find us. Don't forget, the West Indies tour run by the Fanatics is open now. If you would like to be on that tour with Moises and I, www.thefanatics.com.
We are going.
Off the back of last week's episode, a lot of people asking 2 things. One, whether Moises and I are in fact going, and Wazza, you know the answer to that one. And secondly, where the tests are, it's Barbados, Grenada, and Jamaica. So 3 outstanding places in the Caribbean to go to. Moe, thanks as always.
Thank you, Tom. I thought we went pretty well. I'm really looking forward to Waz getting a deal with Qantas and getting us over to the Windies business. What do you reckon?
Yeah, can't wait. Always awesome to jump into the big cricketing topics on days like this. Huge champion trophy ahead. Can't wait to see you guys next time. Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Well, there it was, ladies and gentlemen. Yet another episode of Chin Music. If you enjoyed it as much as we did, please hit the like and subscribe button somewhere under here, and we'll see you on the next one.
Oh, yes, Moe!